Okay. So I think we have, good amount of participation. We have around 47, people who have joined in. So brief about the participants. So we are basically, mainly traders or investors who are doing trading in uh, Indian equities. Also, Hemant is our resident expert who is basically provides his expertise in bond market. Uh, so first of all, welcome to everybody, and very important thing. I want to thank Amaya for doing this for us in a very short notice because I think we announced this one in the morning. Thanks to participants as well for joining on a very short notice. We thought of doing this webinar because we know that the crypto market has been correcting well. So this could be a very good opportunity for us to start investing. So many of us are already investing in cryptos. Maybe some of us have account but not yet started with the investing. So it would be a good session because learning things from somebody who has been doing investments and trading in crypto market is the basic guy that we have is Amaya now. And so Hemant will give a brief introduction about Amaya, and after that, Amaya will start the session. He has prepared. He has been very generous to prepare a good PPT slides for us to explain things on crypto. Uh, so what we are going to have is we are going to have 45 to 60 minutes of session from Amaya. He'll be explaining things to us, and after that we'll have Q&A session. So what you can do is you can write your questions in chat box, and Hemant will take those questions, and Amaya will try to answer those questions for us. Okay, so over to you, Hemant. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you so much. Good evening and warm welcome to all the participants. Thank you for joining. The world is buzzing with the topic of cryptocurrency. That's what we are hearing every news outlet, every social media, every blogs, everywhere we are discussing about the cryptocurrency. The market has suddenly gone down. Still, the trading volumes are going up. So we decided, me and Prashant decided, why not to hear it from someone who is veteran in this industry, and that's why we thought, why not Amaya? He's been there from last almost like 15 years in technology, and from last almost like 9 years he's been there in the crypto world. So we thought to bring him. He's basically from the Germany, and he's been investing in cryptocurrency from almost like 6 years now. He has a vast success in cryptocurrency, and he has a milestone of achieving 100 crores in crypto portfolio. So over to you, Amaya. Thank you so much for being with us. So over to you, Amaya.
Hey, thank you so much, Hemant. One little correction, it's not 100 crore in crypto. That's quite a wild target, to be honest, but nothing is impossible. And thank you for that generous invite and allowing me to present. Let me share my screen and I will start presenting in a bit. Okay. All right. Okay. So I conducted this session last month to a much broader audience. It was an attempt basically to, spread awareness about the basics of crypto in terms of the technology scale and what is the future outlook. Because I am somebody who basically looks at crypto from the technology point of view. I don't really look at crypto from very cliched the way they are called as currencies. I don't look at it from that way. So when I conducted this session, sentiments were very different. We were probably at the peak of bull market in crypto cycles, and today the same session, but the sentiments are completely different altogether, right? So let's see. I haven't actually got a chance to alter this presentation significantly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you all through the slides that I had already prepared. Probably some of the additional topics which I will include, which will definitely interest all of you is to basically connect the dots between why there has been so much noise about the power consumption of the crypto, what is the reality, and how that can be achieved through a proof of stake blockchain, and so on, right? So I'm not calling crypto yet as an asset class, because an asset class that is this volatile cannot be really seen as an asset class by the centralized system believers, right? So what I'm going to cover in this session is not the all these three topics. I'm going to only focus on the section 1 here, which is basically about the crypto basics, technology, scale, and outlook, some of the trading platforms, and why crypto is the next big thing after internet. It's not about, I'm not going to speak in terms of the price, or I'm not going to give you any estimate or a price projections, but the one of the most basic mistakes made by people who want to invest in crypto is they do not look at it from the technology perspective. They do not try to understand, okay, what is the fundamental change that this technology is bringing, right? And how that change is going to touch every aspect of our life going further, let's say in probably 5, 8 year, 10 year, 15 years, probably, right? We are always looking at, if you go to YouTube, you will see if somebody has made a video on the technology side, and somebody has made a video about the price projection of Ethereum or price projection of Dogecoin, that video will have more number of views, right? So that speaks a lot about everybody's perception about crypto, right? Everybody sees it as a get rich quick scheme. At least when I conducted this session last time, that was how it was seen. And now people are realizing it is not that way. It is also a get bankrupt quick scheme as well. Right? So yeah, I'm happy to talk you through, take you through what the technological fundamental building blocks are of this entire crypto as a domain, right? So there are these are some of the most common questions that everybody has. And which cryptocurrency should I buy? And why there are so many coins. So if you go to the coinmarketcap.com, at the top left you will see the number of crypto tokens currently available throughout the centralized as well as decentralized exchanges. And the last time I checked, probably the number was somewhere close to 9,000. So when there are 9,000 different tokens listed, understanding which token to buy is really a nightmare, right? Where can I buy these coins? Because not all exchanges list all these coins, right? When an ICO comes, usually the airdrop happens through different protocols. For example, if a project which basically provides a liquidity pool, or the interest rate borrowing protocol, they usually do an airdrop on a protocol which basically connects all these decentralized finance projects all together, right? Then these flows arrive on the decentralized exchanges such as Uniswap, right? Or a PancakeSwap, for example. And when there is enough volume on the decentralized exchanges, then the coin lists on the centralized exchanges. And by the time these coin list on the centralized exchanges such as WazirX in India, or Binance, or Kraken, or Coinbase, by that time the coin is already probably 100x or 500x, right? So understanding where exactly to buy, how to buy, is really an important thing here, right? uh, what you need to understand here is the concept of decentralized exchanges, how you can connect your wallet with a decentralized protocol. If you understand these things, you will be able to participate in a project's journey way earlier, than people actually discover these things, right? For example, nowadays everybody is so gung-ho about Matic and Polygon, but we discovered Polygon when it was trading at 0.02 cents. And that time it was not really available on centralized exchanges, on Binance, or on these centralized exchanges like WazirX or Coinbase, and so on and so forth. So you had to buy that from Uniswap, or probably on some other exchanges, right? So that is what the missing piece is. By the time these coins come to you on the centralized exchanges, वो बोलते हैं ना मलाई चली गई है. It's like that. The cream of the rally is already gone. The whales that we know, the big wallet holders, that is already gone. So that is why it is so very essential that either you understand what to buy from the tech, and you will understand only when you understand the technology, right? Is it safe to buy in India? And these aspects are already being discussed enough. What about hacking, and is crypto really an asset class? Like I already answered, I don't see it as an asset class really. But we'll touch base on this point number 5 in detail, because uh, this is one of the most ignored aspect. Everybody wants to make money, but nobody wants to secure the tokens that you have bought. The awareness on how to use hardware wallets, or cold storage as we call it, is at rudimentary level. So people leave their tokens on platforms. People, you must have seen a news about a decentralized finance project going completely offline. And they put up a message that, we just scammed you and you can't do anything about it. I'm sorry for that language. That was the exact message that it displayed. So basically, whoever staked the coins through that DeFi project, they lost everything, right? So that actually happened. So understanding the technology side, or rather security side of the crypto, is probably the first and most important thing you need to understand. I mean, if you buy Ethereum, for example, right now at 1600 euros, if it falls, it will rise again. Okay, it will go up again. You may probably not end up losing much on your capital as such, if you are in for a long term. But what happens if somebody comes and hacks the exchange? What happens if suddenly, it happened in Turkey a couple of weeks ago. The exchange suddenly went offline, and the people who had their coins on the exchanges, they completely lost them. How are they going to recover the money that is currently with these centralized exchanges? That's why you need to understand that how to use a cold storage or a hardware wallet. You have to care for your tokens or currencies, as if you want to call it, right? So it's really very important aspect, and it's probably the most ignored one as well. Um, so as I said, the technology is something that intrigued me. I started looking into Bitcoin back in 2012, and to be really honest with you, I didn't do quite well back then. Both I and my brother, we used to do some freelancing work, and we used to receive Bitcoins as a payment. But we had no idea what to do with it. We thought it's a scam. So whoever is ready to sell us a T-shirt from US, or willing to sell us some cards, like digital cards, we were happy to trade our Bitcoins. So I don't even remember how many coins we had back then. But it was late 2015, 2016 when Ethereum finally came on the entire cryptocurrency landscape. That is when my views about cryptocurrencies changed completely, because the unfortunate thing today is people see cryptocurrency is equal to Bitcoin, which is not the case. Absolutely. In fact, uh, I mean, I don't want to be too aggressive when I say this statement, but I'm not really a Bitcoin follower at all. There are multiple reasons for that, but we'll see that as and when we go forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video. Probably you may not uh, be able to listen. Maybe I don't know, because last time the sound didn't play, but there are subtitles. So spend like a couple of seconds watching that video. What that video is, the fundamental building block of any blockchain, any cryptocurrency, and that is nothing but a consensus. How the consensus mechanism work. You need to understand how consensus work. That is when you will be understand why Ethereum is different from Bitcoin, for example, or why a particular project, let's say Cardano, is different from Ethereum, or let's say why ICP is different from Ethereum. If you want to understand the differences, understanding how consensus mechanism work is the first step. Okay, so if you don't get to listen to the sound, I'm sorry, but you can read the subtitles, and I'll speak with Hemant, and we can share this video separately with you as well. Okay, I hope that was good. So yeah, so that's the basic difference between the centralized and decentralized, right? So we don't have to really get into what centralized systems are, what decentralized systems are. But as you can understand, the consensus is what basically makes cryptocurrency so very different from the centralized systems. One thing which I want to make very clear here is, I'm talking at least for the Ethereum, not for Bitcoin, to be really honest. These tokens or these projects, they were never really launched to replace a central authority, or to replace a fiat currency, or to replace governments. Okay, these are far-fetched and extreme views which are expressed by people in order to misguide everybody. Okay, so the the essence of decentralization is to bring efficiency in an inefficient and a congested system. Okay, imagine if I want to transfer money from my German bank account to Binance, it takes at least 2 to 3 working days even when I'm in Germany. Okay, whereas we know that it's nothing but digital entries. My bank makes an entry, Binance makes an entry, and that's it. So why should it take 3 days for my balance to reflect from my bank account to Binance? It's such an inefficient system altogether. So the decentralized systems are actually created to bring that inefficiency in order to support the centralized systems, get rid of these inefficiencies, and operate at better level. Okay, so that is precisely why calling them cryptocurrencies is so very wrong. These are not really currencies. People call them currencies, but the essence is not really to replace the fiat currency. It's not supposed to be the situation that in future you go and start transacting in Bitcoins and Ethereum. You can go and buy a carton of milk for a Bitcoin. I mean, there are businesses that are doing that, but that's not the real usage of the decentralized systems. And when we talk about decentralized system, we have to talk in terms of Ethereum and not in terms of the Bitcoin, because the Bitcoin is not really decentralized. The reason it is not I'm sorry, the reason it is not really decentralized lies in the consensus mechanism. Now you understood how consensus works, right? And the person who was explaining that how the centralized systems and decentralized system works, he said that these are not really people, these are lot of computers, right? So there are primarily two ways of consensus, two broad methods of having a consensus in the system. The first is the proof of work, which is probably the oldest one, and another one is a proof of stake. Okay, it's not really complicated if I give you an example. Now imagine a proof of work scenario on which Bitcoin operates. Okay, what exactly proof of work is? Let's say there is an average Joe, and he is uh, somebody told him that, hey, if you have a computer with a certain computing power, you can start mining Bitcoin. There will be some power consumption definitely, but you will be able to mine something which probably will have a value or a speculative value in the market, right? So that person, what he does, he buys a computer and he puts that computer onto the Bitcoin network as a node, right? And when that person starts mining Bitcoin, let's say this average Joe is not really very wealthy person. He buys a laptop with certain graphics card and certain computing power, and he is able to, let's say, just for an example, mine 1 Bitcoin every month, just for an example. Now there is his neighbor Tom, and he realizes, oh man, I have more money than Joe, and he is able to make 1 Bitcoin per month. What I can do is I can buy 5 computers and I start earning 5 Bitcoins per month. And this cycle is endless. What it means is the person who has control over the computing capacity has the control on the supply of the Bitcoin or a hash of a Bitcoin, as we know. You might have seen that there was a power outage in China, which brought the hash rate of Bitcoin down suddenly a couple of months ago or a month ago, probably. Why was that? Because in China, there are companies or entities who run data centers on a cheap power to mine the Bitcoin. And when somebody has a control over computing capacity, that person has control over supply of those tokens. And if the person has a control over supply of those tokens, that person can anytime pump it or anytime dump it. What essentially happens because of this is, if somebody wants to mine a Bitcoin in India, and let's imagine that in India power cost is not as cheap as it is in China, what happens then? In that case, the person will not be able to even break even for a couple of years, right? So essentially what it means is, in case of proof of work, whoever has a computing capacity is the boss. So essentially there is no decentralization at all. Okay. Now the proof of stake is little different. Okay, and you saw that people are crying out loud so much about power consumption and how the cryptocurrency is consuming more power. If cryptocurrency were to be a nation, how much power it would consume? Well, that is all true for Bitcoin, but for the other platforms that's not going to be true. Ethereum currently is on proof of work, but it is in process of shifting to proof of stake by the end of this year. So it will be able to consume probably the 99.95% less energy. What is proof of stake? Proof of stake means if you have 1 Ethereum, anybody can have 1 Ethereum across the globe, right? And in order to join as on that chain, in case of proof of work, if you want to mine Bitcoin, you join as a miner, right? You mine Bitcoin. But with proof of stake, you become a validator. You start validating the blocks, right? So your role changes from miner to validator. And what happens is the percentage of reward that you get as for playing the role of validator is directly proportional to what you stake on Ethereum blockchain. So if you have 1 Ethereum, you can stake that and you can get reward in terms of the percentage you have staked in. Okay. So because of that, what happens is the control which was there in people's hand who had the entire control over the computing capacity, that risk is completely eliminated. So I can have 1 Ethereum and I can stake that through Binance Ethereum 2.0 staking. What power am I consuming? As good as nil, zero, no power consumption at all. So like if I am able to stake without any power consumption, so will be anybody across the globe from anywhere. So there is absolutely no reason to cry out loud about Ethereum's power consumption once it makes the move from proof of work to proof of stake, which will happen at the end of this year, right? So understanding these two different consensus mechanism is really essential to understand what token you really buy. Okay. uh, what I will quickly cover in these slides is the fundamentals of the blockchain, what exactly blockchain is all about, right? So you can see that the blockchain is nothing but a chain that contains number of different blocks, and each block, as you can see on the screen right now, has three components. First is the transactional data, which can be payments data, consumption data, or any other data. For example, let's say let's give you an example. So if there is Ripple, for example, which primarily deals in the financial applications, so a block on Ripple will always have financials data. There is another project called VET, uh, which basically deals in the supply chain related activities. So the transaction will have only supply chains related data, right? So based on what project is really doing, the nature of the data changes. Okay, so the first component on any block is the data. Okay, second is the hash of the block. What is hash of a block? You can see it as a fingerprint. Okay, so fingerprint is unique to everybody, right? So no two people have similar same fingerprints, right? So the hash of the block uh, is an encrypted and unique identifier, and the third component that there is the hash of the previous block, that basically tells, okay, which is the previous block that I need to connect with. So when you put all these different blocks together, you get a chain. Okay, it forms a chain, and that's what you call a basically blockchain, right? These are a little bit complicated technical terms. I will not get into these explaining what hash is, but what happens is in terms of okay, so this is what I was talking about. So there are three blocks here, and imagine that you want to change the hash of the first block, and there is a hacker who want to change certain transaction there. What happens is the moment you alter something, the hash of that block changes. Okay, so if you can see on the first block, that had the hash as 1234. Okay, and previous hash is 000 because it's a Genesis block, because that's a first block. So first block, which is mined or forged, the mining is in context of proof of work, forging is in context of proof of stake. Okay, so the first block that is created on any blockchain is called as a Genesis block. Okay, now what happens is the second block here, that has its own hash, which is 5678, and it also knows that the hash of the previous block was 1234, but now hacker has changed something, and the hash has now changed to ABCD. So what second block does is it immediately invalidates the entire chain of blocks. So basically that blockchain becomes completely invalid. Okay, now put this in context of proof of work and proof of stake. The person who has computing capacity on the entire network and who has the most computing capacity can use that capacity to basically bring the rest of the blocks on that chain to accept the hash of the previous block, even when it is altered, through the endless computing capacity. It is possible, right? So that is one of the biggest problem in the proof of work systems. In proof of stake, if you want to hack a block, you need to gain control over 51% of the total token supply. In case of proof of work, that is 51% of the computing capacity. That is possible. You can put billions of dollars and have a computing capacity which is 51% of the entire chain. But when it comes to proof of stake, it is almost impossible to buy out complete 51% of the token which are in circulation. Somebody may even argue that, okay, if at all somebody is absolutely hellbent and somebody is absolutely rich, outrageously rich, let's say like Elon Musk, he can still buy 51% of the tokens. Yes, he can. But when he stakes those 51% of the tokens on the node in order to correct the tempered transactions, his transaction will get rejected by the entire chain. and that results in him losing 51% of the coins. So nobody is going to take that much a risk. So that is why the blockchains, which basically are called as immutable ledger. This is the reason they are called immutable ledgers, right? So the consensus is nothing but, it's kind of a peer-to-peer network. We all have used mutorrent or BitTorrent when we were in our degrees and engineering and so on, to download games and download movies, right? So if you can recall some of those memories, you will be able to remember that there are leeches and there are seeds, right? So if you want to download a particular game, what you used to do is you used to go to for example the piratebay.com, and you used to see, okay, I want to download Call of Duty, and I will download it from the link which has maximum seeds, if you remember. So that was the first peer-to-peer network that we all interacted with. Okay, it's just we never saw that from this perspective before, right? So what happens is the main chain is replicated on everybody's system, like you saw in the video. It replicated on the everybody's system, right? When a new block comes in on the main chain, what happens is that block also gets replicated on everybody's system, and everybody now tries to validate that. So unless everybody validates, the block on the main chain is in the waiting state, right? It is not added to the main chain yet. So if everybody agrees, then that block gets added to the main chain. Okay, so that is how basically a chain grows from one block to multiple blocks. So that is how basically the consensus mechanism help to validate what transactions are. I can actually answer you what people really do when they mine or when they validate, but it will be too technical and too much into computer science terminology, and I am happy to explain if anybody has that specific sort of interest, but I want to keep that level of technicalities out of this session for now. Okay, um, the primary reason I'm invested in crypto is its scale, the exponential scale that it offers us, right? Um which in my view no other technology offers today, right? So the blockchain trilemma is a very popular problem. What it means is that any blockchain can have 2 out of 3 properties. Okay, so if you take Bitcoin for example and you take Ethereum for example, there is a fundamental difference between the two. And what that difference is: Bitcoin is so-called decentralized, at least the people who believe in Bitcoin call it a decentralized. Okay, and it is secure. Okay, what it means is it is immutable digital gold. That's what people call it, right? It is immutable digital gold. uh, just a minute. Yeah, but in case of Ethereum, it adopts 2 different properties: it is scalable and it is decentralized. That does not mean that it is not secure. What it means is it is easy to fork Ethereum and create a new project on top of that. I'll give you an example. So Uniswap is a decentralized exchange which is built on top of Ethereum. What happened is, because these all are open source technologies, right? So you can actually go to the repository, see what is the code. You can download all the code, you can make certain changes on the code, and you can launch a completely new project of yourself, right? So people did that with Uniswap. Sorry, they did that with Pancake Swap. So Pancake Swap is also a kind of a swapping protocol. What it means is, if you want to swap Ethereum with Bitcoin, or if you want to swap Bitcoin with Matic or any other coin, you are basically swapping one coin for another coin. So you really don't have to execute that as a trade. You can simply execute that as a swap, right? Uh, so what happens is, what happened, certain people, they saw the code of Pancake Swap and of course the Unify. And what they did is they simply copied the entire code. They made certain changes and they launched a completely new platform. Okay, so this is what it is. So basically you can see the code, you can make certain changes, and you can launch a completely new project on top of that, right? So this is the very basic difference. Have you seen any project built on top of Bitcoin? But if I ask you, have you seen any project built on top of Ethereum? There are 4,000 plus projects which are currently running on top of Ethereum. And with Polygon, there are even more. So Polygon is nothing but the level 2 scaling mechanism for Ethereum. So what I mean by level 2 is what happens. So Ethereum has a primary chain. Okay. If every transaction comes on Ethereum and every transaction comes on Ethereum to get validated, and the more project use Ethereum as the protocol layer, uh, the congested it becomes, right? Hence the cry of Ethereum's high gas fee and so on, right? So what is really a gas fee? So if you want your transaction to get validated, uh, you have to pay certain transaction fees. Okay, just like you want to use your credit card, you have to pay certain commission, for example. So it's like that. So these miners, what they do is they take the blocks based on which block offers the highest fee to us, right? So if I'm in hurry, I will say, okay, I'm ready to pay, 1,000 gwai. Gwai is basically the unit of Ethereum gas. So I'm ready to pay 1,000 gwai, just, validate my transaction. I don't want to wait, right? So what happens is, because of that, the same scenario what we all must have seen when we want to order Uber, right? Imagine a Sunday evening, you are in a market, of course not in corona time, but before, you want to order an Uber and suddenly there is high demand. So what happens is the rate suddenly go up, right? Because of the demand. Same is with Ethereum gas fee as well, right? So the number of projects on it built on top of Ethereum increase, the load on the main chain increases, and the fewer number of transaction it's able to validate. So that is where the projects like Polygon or L2 scaling comes into picture. So what they do is they take certain transaction of the Ethereum, they validate them, and they communicate back to Ethereum that, okay, I have validated it, you can make an entry in your ledger. So L2 is nothing but taking those transactions off the Ethereum, validating them, putting multiple transaction into one single kind of a validator contract, and then just update Ethereum just once. For example, there are 100,000 transactions which are waiting to be validated on Ethereum's main blockchain. You will have to make 100,000 entries, right? Because every transaction you have to validate. But what Polygon does is take these 100,000 transactions off the Ethereum and it takes on its own network. It validates all of them and it puts them into a kind of a wrapper, and it puts that wrapper back on Ethereum saying that, okay, these 100,000 transactions are validated, you just have to make one entry in the Ethereum. So basically Polygon offers an amazing level of scaling for Ethereum. So that is the reason, Ethereum is able to execute so many number of transactions. So what I was trying to tell you is that there are no projects which are currently built on top of Bitcoin, because even though people say that it is possible to fork out the Bitcoin's code and launch a new project, but it is not happening. If you want to see the network effect, that's what I always talk about. The network effect of Ethereum is the largest. Then there are other tokens like Polkadot and Cardano. Cardano is forever, launching. They haven't launched anything at all. Their smart contract ecosystem is not live at all. So that's what the fundamental difference is. So if you want to invest into something from a technology perspective, you have to look at a scale. So that's why I always say Ethereum, you have to look at Ethereum as a protocol. If you go certain number of years or a decade back, you will see that HTTP is the protocol on which every application runs, like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, everything works on HTTP, HTTPS, right? So that's a protocol layer. And on top of that, there is an application layer. What happened in the previous paradigm is the value accrued completely on a protocol layer. That means Facebook is making money, Instagram is making money, WhatsApp is making money. But the consortium who built that protocol, they are not making money. They are surviving on the donation. You have to look Ethereum from a different perspective. That is precisely why, because Ethereum is going to be the protocol layer, and that's where the value will accrue eventually in the future, because every project will use Ethereum and the value percolation will happen on a protocol layer rather than the application layer, right? So that's the basically, the basic difference between the Bitcoin and the Ethereum. So the Lightning chain, which is a Bitcoin chain, it executes 5 transactions per second. A credit card can settle 5,000 transactions per second. There is a Taproot upgrade which is coming to Bitcoin, which is, uh, boasting of 9,000 transactions per second. But Ethereum, once it completes its beacon chain upgrade and EIP 1559, which is primarily to do with reducing gas fee, it will be able to execute 100,000 transactions per second. So you can imagine the scale, you can imagine the reach it will have, right? So there are a number of trading platforms that you can use, and I just use this graphic to show that there are so many tokens available out there, and it's just a mess out there. Okay, so unless you look from a technology perspective, you will not be able to understand which token really has a value. And I get this question very often: how do we value a token? So in equities, we have so many different parameters like P ratio, ROC, ROE. These different parameters are there. You all are expert in that, so I don't have to tell you about those parameters. But is there a parameter in crypto that will help us evaluate a particular token? How should I value Ethereum, right? So there is one key metric here which you can find out is the total value locked. So total commercial value locked in that protocol. So what it basically means, the higher the total value lock, the wider is the adoption. So if the wider is the adoption, that simply means that more and more projects wants to work with Ethereum as a protocol. And basically it creates a kind of an avalanche, or kind of a chain reaction, that if one project uses one particular network, other project doesn't want to use Ethereum, but nonetheless, because everybody else is using Ethereum, they still have to create a bridge with that, right? So that is why understanding technology is so very important. I gave this example of a chef, to explain how people can basically copy a project, make certain changes, and completely launch that project as of their own. So I'll quickly skim through this. I want to give more time to answer the questions, so I'll not stay in this. So I will quickly explain you these slides and why exactly I have created this design. So as you can see, the Bitcoin and Ethereum are the primary two, how do I say, the cryptocurrencies, even if I call them. So as I explained, Bitcoin, so-called, is a store of a value, which I don't really believe. It still operates on a proof of work, and that's why it is, to be really honest, it is really broken. um, because Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, it kind of acts as an anchor. What I mean is, if Bitcoin starts falling, everybody else starts falling with it, no matter what has happened, no matter how fundamentally amazing the other project is. So the Ethereum is the parallel of Bitcoin with way better fundamentals in terms of the technology, way better applications in the decentralized applications and decentralized finance domains. Basically, Ethereum has direct two competitors. One is the Cardano, which is known as ADA, and one is the Polkadot. So the Polkadot still has about 400 odd projects which are currently running on top of it, but ADA, there is absolutely nothing, because the primary smart contract ecosystem of any blockchain, for any blockchain, a decentralized blockchain I'm talking about, not for Bitcoin. Okay, for a decentralized blockchain, the heart is the smart contract. Okay, and smart contract is nothing but a digital instructions given through a programmable code that does certain functions on certain instructions. That's all. That's nothing else than that, right? So the smart contract ecosystem of Cardano is not live at all yet. They are just all talk, no deliver, nothing. Then there is this very interesting project which is called as Chainlink. So as the adoption of crypto as a technology starts growing, more and more off-chain data needs to be brought on chain. So you need an Oracle network to act as an interface between non-blockchain world and blockchain world, and that bridge is nothing but this Chainlink. Okay, so these are basically other tokens which I really don't want to talk about right now. We'll just quickly go through. There are primarily three types of token. One is the utility token, which basically gives right to holder to use certain services on the platform. Then there are security tokens, which like for example, Monero is a security token, right? So they derive their value from the external tradable assets. They offer kind of a security in terms of, there are two types of actually security here. I'm not talking about that security, but network security, if you're talking about, Monero is a perfect example. Then there are governance tokens as well. There are stable coins as well, which basically brings the kind, which are basically pegged with $1:1, right? So there are these three primary type of the tokens which are currently existing. Why I say it is bigger than internet is, you know, there is one key slide I'll show you. Yeah. So you have to see it from this web one, web 2, web 3 paradigm. Web 1 was primarily about browsing the websites. Web 2 was basically using all different applications on top of the existing internet, right? And the web 3 is nothing but having automatically executable smart contracts, which can basically read, write, and execute at the same time. Okay. So that's where the web3 infrastructure is coming in. So there are different web3 protocols. For example, ICP, which is called as internet computer, is also a web3, which is built in parallel to Ethereum, right? So you have to look at this entire ecosystem from technology perspective. I will quickly skim through this. I have already explained you what these primary tokens are. Let me quickly skim through. Okay, sorry for that. Yeah. So you have to look at a paradigm shift in the technology and what are the inefficiencies that it's solving. Uh, and you have to imagine that if you are able to process payments without a middleman, or you are able to invest without brokers. If you remember, SEBI was actually thinking about having a direct market access. If you remember that, you can process loans without bank through basically decentralized finance protocols, right? You can have insurance without an underwriter, or recording without record keeping without an accountant. Basically, it's not really trying to get rid of banking systems. Okay. In my view, these projects are like nukes. If you want to drop it on some nation, it will cause destruction. If you want to use it for power generation, it will create a sustainable ecosystem for everybody. And that's what is happening. Unfortunately, right now there is 99% speculation, 1% people look at it from the technology perspective. And that is why all this, the UN cry about China banning it, and one country banning, another country banning, all these are coordinated kind of a play. And you have to understand also, because crypto is one space where retail investors got in before government and the centralized agencies got in, and they have the control over all these tokens and currencies, and in its birth, trillions of dollars now. And they don't want general people to have such control. And that's why these coordinated efforts basically to bring a kind of constructed crash, right? So there has been instances historically when China banned it in 2013, 2015. But what I really think is crypto will survive. I don't know if Dogecoin will survive, if SafeMoon will survive, but I am pretty sure that Matic, Ethereum, the tokens which basically offer value through the technology, they will definitely survive. Yeah. So I will stop here and I will take any questions if you have. I don't know. I prepared this very at the last moment. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take.
One question, Hemant here. So one question which I want to ask you, Amay, is that what is the advice you want to give it to the novice investor? Jan 2021, we have seen the prices going up, and some of us have been invested in March, April, May, are right now in the losses because there is a sudden dip in the crypto. So what is your advice to the novice investor, and also the outlook going ahead?
Right. So it really depends on what you have bought, to be honest. Uh, I'll give you my example. I have Ethereum, Matic, Chainlink, and ICP as a core portfolio. I don't have anything else. So, and the reason I have this with me is because I know that as a technology they will survive. They'll survive this crash. Not only survive, they will able to rise up again and claim the all-time highs again as well. I don't have any single doubt on that. uh, a genuine suggestion is to everybody is look at this from a technology perspective. Don't look at it as a get rich quick scheme. You see that there are so many narratives which are, spread very, very meticulously. You see, there was a message floating that how two brothers became millionaires investing in Shibinu, for example, the Dogecoin Menelius. So these stories, basically they create a very false perspective. It's not something get rich scheme. You have it's like equities, right? You have to look at the fundamental quality of a project. What is the prospect that project has? What is the real time problem that project is solving? Is it able to solve a really difficult problem that has a huge scale and a huge adoption? If that is true, then you simply go for that. In terms of the recent crash, my honest opinion is it will stabilize in couple of weeks. On 14th of June, EIP 1559 is coming on live on Ethereum blockchain, which basically is to reduce the gas fee, and it is one of the most awaited upgrade on Ethereum since the launch of Ethereum. So I believe before that comes online, there will be many buyers who will be taking jump into it. Uh, the suggestion to all of you is do not invest the money uh, taking out from different other asset classes, because this is extremely volatile. Okay. uh, Invest the money which you are ready to lose. For example, invest that money and try to understand the technology, and eventually as your conviction grows, you can increase your allocation eventually. uh, do not fall for these Doge coins and what Elon Musk is tweeting and safe moon and safe heaven and all these kind of junks. There is a reason these are called as shit coins, and this crash is actually proving that. I hope I was able to answer you, Hemant.
Yes, you can answer some questions which is asked in the chat box.
Okay. Let me check.
Hey, hi, Amay.
Hey, hi.
Hi, this is Shreyan. I just wanted to know, I have been in Bitcoin for quite a long time.
Mhm.
Currently, I'm just 24. So
Your
I've been
audio is
studying.
very low. Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Okay, so I've just invested a very little amount of money just for my study time, and currently I see that like Bitcoin, it has a maximum supply of 21 million coins, whereas ADA, the Maradona, it has a maximum supply, or I believe some 45 billion or something. I'm not sure. But similarly, Ethereum and Uniswap, and they don't have any maximum supply. So, is there any chance of getting any limitations to this coin, other coins?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. That is also a primary reason why Bitcoin is so richly
So
valued, right?
expensive. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so $65,000, and if you compare Ethereum peak, that was probably 40 to 4,400 USD. So that more than 10 times difference is just because of that narrative that the cap is 21 million on Bitcoin, and basically Ethereum there is no cap. Well, in present context, that is true. But as I said, once these Ethereum moves from proof of work to proof of stake, and once this EIP 1559 comes into picture, it basically changes the way Ethereum supply is created. I'll give you an example. Like for now, I explained you what is gas fee, right? Uh, Once EIP 1559 comes into picture, what happens is it splits that gas fee into two components. One is basically a transaction fee, and another is basically a tip. So tip is something like you are tipping a waiter to bring your dish faster. Okay. And that tip has no direct impact on Ethereum supply. It's just to basically get your transaction validated faster.
Kind of
But
premium.
yeah, it's kind of a premium. But the validations, but the validators basically earn through the fees, right? And because of that, it creates, and if they earn through the fees, basically means they earn certain Ethereum back from the on-chain issuance. So what's going to happen with EIP 1559 is the blockchain of Ethereum is going to burn the majority of the issuance, because what it wants to do is it wants to create a kind of a level playing field for everybody. uh, right now the miners, they are making all the money, okay, and the people who are waiting to get their transactions validated, they are ending up paying lots of money otherwise, right? So the on-chain issuance is nothing but, for example, when you stake your Ethereum in, you get certain percentage back in Ethereum. So the majority of that issuance, the that particular part of the validator's fees, Ethereum will start burning it. So if you look it from that perspective, an from an inflationary asset, which virtually has no cap, Ethereum will suddenly, become a deflationary asset with reducing supply. With every block getting forged, the portion of a validator's fee will reduce, and that is exactly why miners are so strongly opposing this EIP 1559.
Correct.
So so yeah, I mean, I don't know what exactly will be the supply of Ethereum, but one thing is definitely sure: from the unlimited supply to a limited supply, that transition will happen through this EIP 1559.
Okay. So basically,
Matic also
there
has
are
a limited
chances.
supply. Just to add, Matic
Yes,
also
yes,
has
yes.
a limited
Correct.
supply, but all the other tokens, they have unlimited supply. So that's why I
Unlimited
said
supply.
I'm not really keen on investing those tokens such as specifically.
Yes, because it's more like a gamble to play on them.
Yeah, it's like a gamble, or as I explained earlier, by the time these coins are available to you and me through the centralized exchanges, वो starting का सारा rally चला गया है. So it makes no sense to invest at such a high and outrageous levels, and that's why such crash are, kind of a godsend opportunity for people like us who missed out on ICO, or who had no understanding of how decentralized exchanges work, for example, right?
Yeah, yeah, correct. Thank you so much.
One
Great.
common question, which is a very common question, is that any regulatory risk involved in trading in cryptocurrency in India. So, do you have any say on that?
Yeah, so looking at the stance, to be really honest, I don't see India banning it. Uh, what I really think should happen is, like I said, there are different types of tokens, right? So there should be regulatory authorities taking control of these tokens. For example, if there is a security related token, let's say Uniswap, which is basically an decentralized exchange token, or a balancer protocol, or Cosmos, which is basically an interest rate protocol, it has something to do with financial products. So either SEBI can take control and create a kind of a compliance network around it, and then there are other utility related tokens, and there are governance related tokens. So PMO can take control over some other tokens. See, the regulation should come, because if the regulation doesn't come, the the entire domain will not stabilize, and if it doesn't stabilize, it will not be able to stand a chance to be seen as an asset class. And if it's not seen as an asset class, it is always be seen as a gamble. But looking at the huge donations that we have received on crypto funds for COVID, my view is there will be a regulation, but there will be no ban as such.
We already crossed 1 hour. If you wish, you can take few questions from chat box.
Okay, query: in proof of stake, does it mean that risk of security increases owning to single validator? Well, there is no single validator, to be really honest. So in order to become a validator on Ethereum, for example, with this proof of stake, which is we call Ethereum 2.0, uh, you have to have 32 Ethereum tokens. Okay, so it's not a single validator, and there is a minimum number of validator nodes requirement. So unless that those many number of nodes are online, Ethereum 2.0 will never go live. So there is no risk of one single person controlling controlling the supply. There is one risk though. If you have, let's say, 100 billion worth of Ethereum, yes, you can control a supply. So that is why then there is another consensus mechanism called as a delegated proof of stake, which comes into picture. Delegated proof of stake is basically, it creates a kind of a governance layer on top of the existing proof of stake. What it tells that, okay, there are normal validators with 32 Ethereum, and they are able to validate normally. But suddenly somebody comes with $100 billion worth of supply and wants to become a validator. The governance layer will basically tell them that we vote this node down, because that node has too much power basically to dictate what happens on the network. So the delegated proof of stake solves the security risk of proof of stakes. Stake of space, I don't understand what that question was. Is Ethereum a program on blockchain or a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin? Well, these are not really currencies. These are token coming out of a blockchain. These are rewards given to people for validating transactions. It's speculators who calls them currencies, right? So Ethereum is basically a platform. It's, you have to see, it's a network which runs on a smart contract, on a code of itself, and it allows other products to be built on top of that. So you have to see it as, for example, Android. So Android is an operating system, but it also allows people to build mobile applications and games on top of it. Participants can post. Okay, sorry. What is the unicorn token? Just curious. Well, it's a decentralized platform called Uniswap. So in the decentralized exchanges, that's where the highest volume is. So once an ICO comes, once the airdrop is complete, the 50% of that ICO supply comes on a decentralized exchange, and the maximum supply comes on Uniswap. Uni. View on Matic is very positive. There is no question about it. I actually have known Sandeep quite well. So I'm pretty sure that Polygon will keep on doing fantastic. Polygon supply, and I'll tell you something. Polygon supply is actually being cornered right now. There is not enough Matic available on decentralized exchanges or centralized exchanges at all. Should we invest in ICOs? How to identify genuine and real ICO? Yeah, so that's where your technology background comes into picture. You have to see who are the associated developers of a given ICO, for example, and what are the ways these ICOs are offering these tokens, right? So yeah, so you have to have some technology background in order to identify good ICOs from bad ICOs. First time investor, well, it's a godsend opportunity. You have to see it as, March 2020 of crypto. In March 2020 there was a fire sale in Indian equities, and people were so afraid. People were giving target, Bajaj Finance 800 jayega, Reliance 200 jayega, Nifty 4000 jayega. That's exactly what is happening in crypto. The panic and the negative sentiments are at peak. I'll tell you, the good tokens like Ethereum, Matic, Chainlink, they'll never go to zero. They will rise again. They'll go to all-time high again. If you look at the Wyckoff distribution, that's what the video is spreading. But after Wyckoff's distribution comes Wyckoff's accumulation, and after that comes a fierce rally. You have to see the other part of that as well. And even Nifty has followed that Wyckoff distribution, accumulation, and rally charts historically. So I don't see why good tokens, people holding good tokens will never be in loss. I'm pretty sure of that. Tokens are interchangeably called as coins. So there is no difference as such. So safeguarding your transaction, I'll take this as a last question. Do not leave your tokens with exchanges. There are hardware wallets like SecureX or Nano Ledger, or there is called as Taser. You can order these from Amazon. There are stepwise instructions how to connect these hardware wallets. There are different types of wallets. There is Ethereum wallet, there is Bitcoin wallet, and there is altcoin wallets as well. If you, once you connect this with your system, you simply go to Google and use how to use Nano Ledger. you'll see a 14-15 minute long video. Take all the coins on your hardware. Don't leave anything on the exchanges. What happens is if tomorrow Binance stops working, you have your coins. You can connect your hardware wallet with Kraken or any decentralized exchange and still be able to sell it. What happens is if you lose that hardware, that hard drive, cold storage, there is still possibility to recover them through a recovery phrase. Okay, so do not take security lightly. Invest in a good hardware. Take all of your coin on the hardware. Don't leave anything on the exchanges. And last thing, there are scam projects, decentralized finance project, DeFi projects that promise you of giving 50% return, 70% return per year if you stake with them. Do not fall for these. You have to understand, as the number of people staking increases, the APY starts falling down even further, right? So nobody in the real world can offer you 70%, 50% APY, right? So if you really want to stake, either do it through Coinbase or Binance, or don't do it at all.
We already crossed 1 hour.
Amaya, this
Yeah.
is Giri. Can I ask a question? Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, see, the whole concept is decentralized. I agree. Okay, but all these exchanges are centralized. Okay,
Yeah,
so how do you
absolutely
look?
agree with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
so
I
how do
agree
you
with
look
you.
at this cake? You know, I've been reading about this Pancake Swap. You know, which is kind of a decentralized trading experience we're trying to get.
Yeah.
So, anything interesting in this space?
Absolutely, absolutely. I fully agree with you. So eventually, the decentralized exchanges should be the space where you should do all your transactions. Like I said, Binance and Coinbase, they are still centralized exchanges. But the problem is we are in the infancy of the crypto cycle in terms of the technology understanding. At least in India, a lot of people are at the start of that curve. So we really don't know how to use Uniswap, for example, or how to use PancakeSwap for that example. People don't even know how to use a hardware wallet. So that's why the starting point for such people is always a decentralized exchange, centralized exchange like Coinbase and Binance. Once they spend certain number of years into that space, their technology and the entire operational level knowledge increases, and eventually they should shift to decentralized exchanges, and decentralized exchanges they should be the mainstream for crypto. I completely agree with you on that.
Thank you. I mean, I think June seems to be the critical month for crypto as a thing. I know Ethereum is launching, and also I hear about the Binance marketplace launching in June 2021. So
yeah, they're launching an NFT marketplace. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amay. Thank you for your time. And thank you, audience. We all can log off. We have already recorded this session, so we'll be circulating to all the groups. Yeah. So whoever has missed can again recheck. Thank you.
Yeah, Hemant.
Thank
So
you.
Prashant here. Yeah, Amaya, again, thanks a lot for joining and doing the session for us. For participants, what we're going to do is we're going to upload the recording on, if possible, on our channel. And if Amaya, you want, you can share that with you as well. And if you want, you can upload it on your channel as well.
No, please feel free to upload on here. No problem with that.
Sure. So let us stay in touch, Amay. I hope you also enjoyed interacting with us. Thanks to participants as well for joining. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry if it was too technical. I had to rush because the nature and the depth of the topic is so vast. You can't really cover a lot in 1 hour. But if there is any confusion, I'm happy to take questions offline as well. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you so much, Amaya. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hemant,
you.
for coordinating this call. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.